Hello, good evening. Welcome to Books and Bush Tea. I am your host, Aniki Hill, and Aniki Brown. I do get confused sometimes because I'm back and forth between these surnames. And I often forget to introduce myself, which I was reminded of last week. But thank you for being with us. Welcome back to Books and Bush Tea on CMR TV. We're also on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and I'm curious to see who joins us actually on Instagram. But this evening, we have our final session, our final episode for Women's Month. And I'm super excited about the conversation that we're about to have. But before we get into our guest, who is a very special person that I think you all are going to all fall in love with, I want to just touch base with you on how the week's reading has gone. So I'm super proud of myself. I don't know if you all know this, but I have been counting my reading for the first time. I normally don't track how many books I read in a year because in the way I asked my niece the other day, so Morgan, do you count how many books you've read? How many books have you read for the year? Auntie Nikki, why would I do that? I don't count how many chips I eat when I open a bag of potato chips. I was like, oh, there's one just like me. So I've never really counted how many books I read for the year. But this year I set myself a goal just to see how I naturally read because I don't know. And I set myself a goal of 4 books a month. And this year on Goodreads, because remember I introduced you to Goodreads, sometime in February, we did a little bit of a feature on Goodreads and how to use these apps as readers. And I think I might be 5 books ahead of my goal for the year, which is insane. I'm learning just how much of a nerd I am. And I'm okay with that. So this evening, I am reading book 3 of the Villains and Virtues series, because remember I have been like down in this silly fantasy comedic type. It's kind of romantasy, but honestly it's more of a comedy, and this is book 3 and I'm falling asleep to it really well because I like to read a cozy fantasy to fall asleep. And I've already told you all that my favorite of these is Between, but there's another one that I actually remember that I've started again called The House Witch, which is a man. And it's a funny series. It has 3 trilogies. The first is about the House Witch, and then it's about each of his children. So that's a fun one. But all this, so funny. I'm going to have to ask my guest about this later. But I also mentioned last week that I had read The Orchid and the Dandelion. It was a conversation. It was written by a pediatrician. And this is also my stretching myself and reading more nonfiction for the year. So The Orchid and the Dandelion is a book about children and highly sensitive children acting as the canary in the coal mine, and the evolutionary functions and purposes of having these extra sensitive people. So that has been an interesting book, and I actually finished it really, really quickly. It was a bit of a heavy one for me. But then this weekend, I picked up something about highly sensitive people again, and it's called Thrive, the Highly Sensitive Person and Career. I'm going to share that with you guys because, sometimes, and I'm noticing this particularly having had employees and coaching some of the young people in my life, like I have nieces and nephews and godkids and so on, about how to choose your career. And some of us are just very, very susceptible to our environment. Some people can thrive anywhere. And I have learned that I'm not necessarily one of those people, and I've beaten myself up about it for many, many years. But now I'm starting to actually accept that, hey, maybe this sensitivity is a gift and there are ways to use it. But that's a really lovely book that I finished in one day. But to be fair, remember, I listen to my books a lot of the time. My audiobooks, and I'm going to have to move because I just realized I unplugged my computer, but just bear with me. You can still hear me as I talk. But my audiobook love has been very, very useful in this. So I have been kind of cleaning the house, and funny enough, I was chopping bush on the weekend. with this audiobook in my ears called Thrive, and taking some inspiration from highly sensitive people, other highly sensitive people, because I'm starting to acknowledge that I am one, and how they have managed career in some of the best environments for people such as myself as they navigate career, right? So I highly recommend it. But it's one of those things. It's not an easy read. I feel like these books come to you when you need them in life, not necessarily. They're not necessarily for everyone at every time, right? And I find that generally speaking, with self-help and some of those nonfiction books come into your life when you need them. Finally, I have not been able to stop thinking about the Project Hail Mary movie. As you all know, from the time I started this show, I watched it in the first month, I think, or the second month of the show. I listened to the book with my partner, and then we saw the movie this past week. And I already talked about it last week, so I'm not going to belabor the point. But if you have not seen this movie yet, I highly, highly, highly recommend watching it in the cinema. It is an experience. And I'm curious, for those of you who watch it before you read the book, I'd love to hear what you think of it. I'd love to hear what you think of it. And if for any of you who have watched it and read the book, please reach out to me. I just need I need someone to talk to. I need someone to talk to about this book. It is so lovely. So there were pieces of it that were just actually, you know what? I haven't talked about it on the show. I talked about it on Instagram. So let me just recap really quickly. So we read it. We then went to see it. And my partner said to me on the way out, I don't know, because I think this might be the first time he's really done this, where he's actually intentionally read a book before watching the movie. He said to me, I don't know if I kind of feel like, I feel badly that I didn't get to watch that and experience it for the first time. But at the same time, I also am glad that I know how long it took and the kind of effort that went into like getting out of the bed, getting out of the atmosphere, and some of the fears that he might have had in going to like rescue Rocky. And I know that I've kind of like that's not really a spoiler. It doesn't make any sense. Just ignore it if it feels like a spoiler. But that movie was one of the best adaptations I've seen of a book ever. I was really, really impressed with it. And I highly, highly recommend it. But I highly recommend both. Doing both is really, really what I recommend, because yes, the movie captures a story, but it highlights things. And if you're a science nerd, or if you're really interested in the suspense of stuff, I highly recommend reading it. But tonight is the last episode for Women's Month. And tonight is very special because we have a very special guest. Dr. Joanne Brathwaite Drummond is joining us. She is a consultant psychiatrist at Behavioral Health Associates Cayman. I think they're on Hospital Road. Dr. Brathwaite Drummond, and I need to shorten his name. Like, I need to give her a nickname in some way. But she obtained her Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery, her MBBS, from UWI Mona in 1997. After gaining experience in primary care and emergency medicine in Jamaica, she then returned to Barbados, which is her home, in 2003. She continued service in emergency medicine and geriatrics for 2 years. She then undertook and completed a doctorate of medicine in psychiatry at UWI Cave Hill, which is in Barbados, in 2009. So Dr. Brathwaite Drummond also holds a master's in public health, and we know we need people with masters in public health. Such a critical thing. We learned that during COVID, didn't we? With the University of Liverpool since 2011, and she has served in the field of mental health for the past 20 years, 13 of which were as a community-based consultant psychiatrist treating patients across the lifespan. Dr. Brathwaite Drummond was also an associate lecturer in psychiatry with the University of the West Indies for many years, contributing to both undergraduate and postgraduate programs. Dr. Brathwaite Drummond is a passionate advocate for those with mental health conditions and is eager to contribute to the Cayman Islands health system. Now, I met her quite by accident. We were being interviewed on the same day about mental health, and me about my book. Um, in the waiting room for the interview, we struck up a conversation, and I was just struck by how natural a fit she is. I feel to Kiman. We started to just connect, and I feel like she has a talent for asking the right questions. And I was really struck by her honor and respect, with which she just naturally treated our people and our culture. And I decided right then and there that she was my people. So I'm really, really glad to have her, and I'm going to welcome her to the stage. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's going to be an exciting time, you and I. I think we had a lovely weekend. I think of watching the Manosphere in tandem. So we
Yeah,
it's so
that
funny
was,
because I'm moving away from books today. Like I'm in the film area right now.
yes, I'm realizing that.
But we talked about so many things, and our
Hmm.
conversation was super meandering, and I had a hard time, like I was telling you earlier, narrowing down the topic for today.
Hmm.
How do I get the best support for our women out of the conversation that you and I are just going to
Hmm.
naturally enjoy having? And
Hmm.
so, but I had it on my list of things to do to watch the Manosphere documentary on Netflix. Did you actually finish it?
I did not. It is toxicity distilled
Right.
in to a very high concentration. So
I think it started out
yeah,
worse than it ended, though.
okay.
It started
But
out worse
that's
than it
that's
ended. I will tell
that's
you
good.
that.
The beginning is
Mhm.
really I couldn't go down from there.
Oh
So
man. And I'm dying to hear what anyone who else has watched it. I'm dying to hear what y'all think of it because it is
mhm. It's very disturbing.
it is. But and that
Mhm.
was the first time you come across red pill content, right?
No,
Okay, good.
actually.
Okay, good.
First time I'd heard it
Mhm.
um, described as red pill content,
Mhm.
but I am a mom of
Ah.
a 21-year-old, and he keeps me up to date with all manner of things.
Mhm.
So he did say to me, yeah, there's some extreme folk.
Out in the
Yeah,
world.
there's some fairly extreme folk, and yes, I was aware of it, and
Yeah.
yeah, hmm very concerning, very disturbing.
Yeah. And it's kind of insidious because we don't even know who's plugged into this stuff until they
Hmm.
have like dog whistles
Hmm.
that it's very similar to white supremacists. Some of these
Hmm.
male supremacists, which is what I kind of call them, they you hear a couple of terms and it's like a red flag immediately.
Hmm.
One is a high value man.
Right.
They describe themselves as high value men.
Hmm. Hmm.
The involuntary celibate term has been kind of, I think that's
Yes,
been taken over.
incels.
Yeah, the incels. I
Hmm.
feel like that's now started to they avoid that term because that's been just they've been mocked with it so badly.
Yes,
I don't think they use it on
endlessly.
purpose anymore. Yeah. But then there's so much toxicity around it, and
Hmm.
it struck me that this is the world that we live in.
Hmm. Hmm.
This is the world that women are living in. Which is
I was concerned, as I said to you, not just for
mm-hmm,
young women, but for young men,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
because that dog whistle that you mentioned can be heard by people, and it's more than likely going to be heard by young men who have
Yep.
certain vulnerabilities, low
Yeah.
self-esteem, possibly, a risk of depression, or
Mm-hmm,
who are anxious. And entering a world like that,
mm-hmm.
where the core values are so distorted, is such a risk for their mental health. So
Yeah.
I was concerned for young women getting drawn into, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, into that kind of life, but also for young men. It is
Mm-hmm.
really toxic,
Yeah.
very dangerous.
And that's not even the only danger that we're experiencing. And it's not so there's the day to day, almost like mundane dangers, right? The
Hmm.
um microaggressions in the workplace.
Mhm.
There's the inequalities that we still live under. But
Mhm.
then I'm just so present to the unveiling of the harm against women that is coming out of the discussion, even about the Epstein files,
Yeah.
you know? And
Mhm.
then even
Mhm.
closer to home, there's a lot that is happening right now. I don't For those of you who follow the news, and the morning show on Cayman Mall Road around human trafficking and prostitution
Mhm.
in Cayman, and the taking advantage of young women from
Mhm.
rural areas in the Philippines. And
Mhm.
so this is a timely conversation for us to have.
Mhm. Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you
we've
know,
made tremendous
before
strides
we,
as women, but we
yeah,
are still at risk. Still at
yeah.
risk. Mhm.
And in so many ways, educated women such as ourselves are often sheltered from it, but not always,
Mhm.
right? But sheltered from it because we have the independence, we have the strength to be able to
Mhm.
step away.
Mhm.
A lot of us, we have the tools, right, and the language. But it's an interesting time to be alive as a woman, because it's almost like we're in transition.
Mhm. Yeah, we still have a lot of battles, and some of them we kind of figured we'd fought already, but
Yeah,
here
yeah,
we are again. Mhm.
yeah. Here we are again. Here we are again. But here you are. Here you are in Cayman. How are you finding it?
Yes, it's been lovely. That's the truth. I caught up with a colleague that is also Barbadian earlier in this week. Um, and I had to say that as well. It's really been lovely. I honestly have not done a lot more than, well, I've had one really good drive out to East End
Mm,
with my husband. We went out to the Wreck of the Ten Sail, which was some place that we decided to visit again because my
okay.
being in Cayman is such an interesting story
Mm-hmm.
in that, as I said to you, prior to the 10th of October last year, living in the Cayman Islands was not even a thought in my mind. Not like it wasn't a consideration. This was not
Oh
anything that
man.
years and years of planning or even months and months and months of planning. 10th of October saw a job offer in the newspaper in Barbados, which I was not looking for. I didn't even see it there. It was posted in a chat. Um, and yeah, by the 2nd of January, I was here.
Landed.
Yeah,
Landed.
that's right. And
Wow.
it's so I said we were going again because we went on a cruise in December of 2023, and one of the stops was the Cayman Islands. And he and I had kind of a wow, what is this? Oh my goodness kind of moment. Because wherever we went on the cruise, all the stops, we picked up little souvenirs. And there's a shop, I drove past it just the other day um, in the town, and I picked up a souvenir. It was a key ring, and it was a little bit of sand from the
Oh,
Cayman Islands.
yeah,
And I went back. I just picked that up, and that was the beginning and the end of that thought. But on
yeah.
my last day of work in Barbados,
My
are
dogs
you
are
being
fighting.
it?
I'm listening.
Oh
Continue.
dear. Yes, when I was on my last day of work in Barbados, and I went to return my keys. I took off this key ring, and I said, "What
Oh,
is this?"
is there
I
came
have
on
been,
sand?
I, Mhm. And
Oh, that is amazing.
I said to my husband, "This was meant to be. I've been walking to work with this every day for the last
Meant to
for the last
happen.
2 years. This place was calling me. I
Oh my goodness.
yeah, this place was calling me across the waters, and this is it. I said, "Wow, this is amazing." So we both thought, "Wow, this is something else." Ooh, puppers!
I'm sorry. I had to grab her because
Yes.
they're
No,
fighting.
please don't be sorry. Please
She,
don't be
she,
sorry.
I have a
I
cat
know I'm a
right
serious.
here.
Oh,
And yeah,
listen.
there's a kitty right there, and then there's the
Oh no,
puppy
I'm a
over here. So I feel like,
serious dog person. I'm a serious
oh,
dog. I'm a serious, serious dog person. So please do not apologize. Dogs make everything better.
I know they're good for my mental health.
They are. They are.
But
Yes. So,
you mentioned like this is just meant to be. Like you're meant to be here in so
I
many
am.
ways.
I am.
But this is the thing that one of the things that I thought was so fascinating in our conversation is that you are also the child of a seafarer,
Yes.
which
My
is how
dad.
we define
Hmm.
being Caymanian in some ways.
And I did not know that
Hmm.
until I ran into you at
Hmm.
yeah, the Compass
Yeah, yeah,
studio. I
yeah,
did not know that that was such a big part of Caymanian culture.
yeah, yeah.
That is really interesting. And then chatting with you, and that's what I was saying to you. We had just those few minutes before I think
It's
I went
true.
on, and then by the
5 minutes
time I
or
left, you were all mic'd up and going.
so.
And I said to my husband, I met this lady and she's a poet and she's Caymanian and she knows things. I feel, I feel she's somebody I need to find a way to spend
Yeah.
more time with. I feel that she understands this culture. She knows this place.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think she can kind of help me to understand because that is, as I said to you, something I very much wanted to understand. You
Yeah.
can't,
Yeah.
for me, my understanding of the culture is also central to my practice of
Of course.
psychiatry.
Of
So I
course.
really wanted to understand and, really not have it from the foreigner's point of
Hmm.
view, kind of a
Hmm.
thing. I really wanted to, because I lived in Jamaica. I may have said to you, I lived in Jamaica for about 11 years. And that was how I learned Jamaica through the eyes of Jamaicans.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. But being the child of a seafarer, and this is something I was sharing with you earlier, is that it is such a defining feature of what it means to be Caymanian. And there's a
mhm.
ritual that there's a friend of mine that asked me years ago, what does it mean to be Caymanian? And his idea of what it meant to be Caymanian is if you can tell the name of your grandfather's boat.
Oh,
Okay. So and there are two ways to interpret that, right? Is either the boat
wow.
he had at home
Uh-huh.
or the boat he was out to sea on,
See on.
right? and
Wow.
and and it's interesting because it is such a like my grandfather was on the Inagua foam. I know that one for sure. He went down on the Soto Trader. Like there's so each one of our families has a
Mm-hmm.
history of boats. And
Oh,
you
right.
come to a culture to serve this nation, really, to come and serve as someone who is such an expert in the mental health sphere, and you come with a special understanding of what our history would feel like, right? Because
Wow.
your dad being a merchant marine, our
Yes.
grandfathers almost all being merchant
Yeah.
marines, like it's such a
Wow.
special connection.
But this whole thing about knowing the name of the boat, I'm gonna have to
Mhm.
ask Daddy because my dad is still alive. Yeah, I'm gonna have to ask Daddy to give me some names
Yeah, yeah. The name of
because
it,
he
the
did
boat that he
that.
served on.
Yeah, I think maybe for the first 12, 12, yeah, about 11, 12 years of my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that is
Hmm.
pretty special.
Hmm.
And so we see that women in a society such as ours have a unique history of being the ones who were at home, you know,
Hmm.
being the ones
Hmm.
who were not just responsible for the home
Hmm.
and the child rearing, but also responsible for the investment that the family's resources went into.
Yes.
Like so the men would send their funds home,
Yes.
and the women were the ones who were building houses
That
and,
was my
and
mom.
right.
That was my mom.
And so there's a different world that we come out of,
Hmm.
and a different cultural context
Hmm.
that we then become when, and
Hmm.
particularly as women, I find that
Hmm.
Cayman is one of those places that is probably a true matriarchy, or was a true matriarchy, because I think
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
changed a lot when the men stopped going to sea,
Going to see. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
But I don't want to they're okay. So the reason why I really wanted you to come on today is because I have also been reading. I've been reading a book that I've mentioned on the show a couple of times. I'm just gonna
Mm-hmm.
guide this because this is, we also have quite a lot of. I find that there are two types of reading that I have avoided doing in my life. One is books about slavery, and another one is books about female suffering. And it's because I often cannot handle it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I find that it's
Mm-hmm.
very difficult for me to handle. I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to get this light back on. So sorry. I think this new location for my show is probably not the best. But there's a book that I've been mentioning a few times
Mm-hmm.
on the show, and it's the people's history of the United States.
Oh.
And the chapter that I struggled the most with before getting to the history of the expansion into the West,
Mm-hmm.
right, pushing of the Native Americans into the West, was
Mm-hmm.
a chapter called "The Intimately Oppressed." Right, and there's a history of women coming into the New World and women who were already here. Women coming in as wives of the white settlers,
Mm-hmm.
and women coming in as indentured workers from
Mm-hmm.
Ireland,
Mm-hmm.
which were treated a lot like slaves,
Mm-hmm.
and then women who were coming in on the slave ships, which
Right.
were, they were enslaved. And the three
Mm-hmm.
experiences were different, but they were all forms of oppression.
Indeed.
And so
Indeed.
the language around it, so these are like it's like the four mothers of our experience of today,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but it's led to us being very confused about where we are, particularly in a mixed society such as our own, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
very,
Mm-hmm.
very mixed, very Irish,
Yes, I have. I've
right?
noticed that. I've noticed that.
Very Irish in history,
Mm-hmm.
very much Afro Caribbean, and also Latin Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
And there's such a mix of history and heritage in this, so there's
Yes.
a confusion I find about where we are.
Mm.
And so apart from the historical context of being the matriarch in this Cayman society
Mm-hmm.
of being sea wives, there has
Mm-hmm.
been this confusion about, because the protection of the women's virtue, and the
Mm-hmm.
seeing the white woman who was kept up in the house
Right. As
existing
being
here,
superior. Yes. Yes.
but she also had to work like a slave,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Right.
there's so much confusion about it, that it's not as stratified as it would be in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
there's still confusion in the female experience, I find. And are we safe and are we not?
Mm-hmm.
But what would you say in the world that we live in, and having been here for the period of time that you've been,
Mm-hmm.
what are the greatest threats that you see to women's mental health?
The greatest threat to anybody's mental health is stress, and women have their own unique stressors. Um, I think we've pushed quite a bit and needed to for equality. But I think sometimes one of the things that needs to be highlighted is that we are different to men. Our needs are different. Our struggles are different. Our biology is different. And at different times in the lifespan, we have different needs. I think when you look even from a biological perspective, um, a lot of a woman's worth was often tied to her reproductive capacity. And back in the day when, you know, you started having kids at 15, you went through menopause and the life expectancy was maybe 55. Your reproductive years were the majority of your life because you went through menopause and you died. So that was pretty much it. But
Hmm.
yeah, and with a lack of education, lack of educational opportunities for women, and so on, it was housework and child rearing, and that
Yeah.
that was pretty much it. But in today's society, women, we still often carry those same, and I hesitate to say burdens, but we still have those same responsibilities.
Mhm. Mhm.
But now we've developed our brains and we are operating in two workplaces, the
Mhm.
home and the office,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we're expected, whether we're remunerated in the same way or not, we're expected to produce in both areas optimally. And sometimes your biology is fighting against that.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. 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 At least once a month, and then
yes,
sometimes, and then when you get to a certain
yes,
age, for years.
yes, yes.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. We mark time with our bodies. So it's really quite an experience to be a woman. And I think it's gotten harder because sometimes you're never in the off position because you're in the on
Mhm.
position in the
Mhm.
office and then you come home
Yep.
and you've got important roles, mother, sometimes wife, sometimes both,
Mhm.
partner, and there's always a tremendous requirement for output.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. And
Mhm. We're never off.
sometimes yeah, you're always in
Never
the
off.
on position, always in the on position. And there's sometimes tremendous guilt associated with asking for time for yourself or needing time for yourself. And as a result of that, a lot of women put self-care, which is something that is essential. We put our own stress management at that's the last thing on the list. That is something that's optional. That is something that can be left out if time is short, if
Mhm.
money is
Mhm.
short. That's something that doesn't have to happen. And then we're exhausted,
Mhm.
or our mental health suffers,
Mhm.
and we have no clue why. It's because taking care of ourselves is not something that we are afforded the time for. Sometimes we don't make the time for it. And even if the time and money are there, sometimes there's such guilt
Mhm.
surrounding
Mhm.
that. That I said to a patient just this week, we are, everybody else is a human being, but you
Yeah.
live as a human
Human
doing.
doing.
Yeah,
Yes.
because our
Yes.
value now is what you produce.
Yeah.
Children, meals, uh, chores.
Yeah.
It's about that's what makes us feel valued.
Yeah.
It's what we produce, and we don't look at our intrinsic value,
Mhm.
just being ourselves, that we bring value to any space that we occupy because we're women. So I think it's important for us, it equality, but also to emphasize the difference. I always joke with my husband and tell him, I do not want you to treat me as your equal. I want you to treat me better than you.
Oh, I love that. I
I don't
love
want
that.
equality. I
Yeah.
want
No
special
one.
treatment.
I hear you. I
I
hear
don't
you.
want you to no, treat me
Oh,
better.
that is so funny because I think that's what we all want, and it's like just in some ways, there's been a challenge. I have had tough years recently, and it's been an interesting conversation because I journal every morning,
Mhm,
and some of what you're describing has come up in my journaling so much because not only do we experience guilt around taking care of our needs, but we also have a strange experience around receiving help.
oh yes,
Right? So there's
yes.
that receiving thing we have been taught to not receive. What do you
We
think of
did.
that? I'd love to hear what you
Yes,
think of that.
yes. We have, and then sometimes, well, I can confess. Sometimes we want to be independent, and again in that push to be seen as equal and not to show weakness. And I'm a woman and I can do it. And often we can. So we sometimes condition ourselves not to ask for help. I'm very guilty of that. My husband and my son are very short. I'm only 5'4", So I'm always the shortest person in the house, and they will come and see me struggling to get something done. And so, but I'm just so accustomed to, you wanna do it,
Yeah.
you want to get on with it. You can do this yourself. And some of that has to do with, a fear of being seen as weak or incapable, because
Mhm,
that is where we are coming from historically,
mhm,
being seen as less than,
mhm.
simply because that's how we were seen. So
Yeah,
you're a
yeah.
woman, you're a little woman, your place is in the
Mhm,
home,
mhm,
or
mhm.
you have to be a damsel in distress, and oh my goodness, can you help me lift this? You can't lift anything heavier than a fork type of a situation.
Yeah, yeah.
And you
Yeah.
kind of take that to the extreme, where you don't take help, you don't accept help when it is offered. And then there's also the fear, kind of goes back as well, to safety, the,
Mhm.
the, the issue that you raised of safety,
Mhm.
because depends on who's offering.
Yes.
Sometimes there's a price tag for the help. And
Yes.
you gotta decide, do I need the help, or am I gonna just struggle through? Because
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
what's attached? What's the string that I can't see that's
Oh,
attached
wow.
to this offer of help? So it goes back to safety as well. Sometimes to stay safe,
Mhm.
depending on the context in which you're
Mhm.
you're you're operating, safety might require that you do it on your own or you leave it out, you
And it's
know.
interesting that you say that because it doesn't actually have to be a threat to you, such threat to your obvious safety. It could actually be very much
No.
your psychological safety too, right? I
Mm-hmm.
don't want this thrown in
Mm-hmm.
my face later.
Later
That
on,
kind of thing.
yeah, I don't
I'll,
want to be shown in the workplace to have, not been able to manage X or Y
on my
because
own.
I'm already, on the back foot as a woman in maybe what might be a male-dominated field. So when
Mhm.
I accept this offer of help, does this show up in my appraisal? Do I get passed
Mhm.
over? Am I already at high risk of being passed over? So it's safety, not necessarily, as you said, to the person. So we're
Mhm.
not saying, not safety as in can I take this lift home,
But
without
that
being
does exist as
assaulted.
well.
But there's
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
there's that
But on
too.
top of that, yeah, there is
Indeed,
the.
there's threat and then there's threat. There's risk
Mhm.
and then there's risk.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
sometimes accepting help does not seem safe. So,
Yeah, and I also find that it's also not safe from ourselves either because it ties back to that guilt piece, where I have found myself in the last couple of years having to accept help in places that I never ever would have allowed myself to
mm-hmm,
accept help before,
mm-hmm,
and in particular from my partner.
mm-hmm,
And I noticed that there is this big like big bad woman thing that I was supposed to do. And
mm-hmm.
so accepting help was such a violation of who I thought I was. And
Mm-hmm,
now working that out has been an interesting thing because I'm giving him the gift of my vulnerability,
mm-hmm,
and he has showed
mm-hmm.
up as a partner. And
I am
why
so
should I
happy
not
for
accept
you.
it, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. But it's like there's something around the conditioning that is really hard to shake. Really, really hard
Mm-hmm,
to shake, even in
mm-hmm,
even in safety. Even in safety, there's that
mm-hmm,
conditioning around accepting help. So stress is a big part of it, and our stressors are often coming from guilt and conditioning
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
around and having two workplaces is what you're saying,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and then
mm-hmm,
the struggle around the self judgment around accepting help, and also
mm-hmm,
help not always being safe.
mm-hmm.
So these are some of the biggest threats that you see to women's mental health.
Absolutely. We have a challenging internal environment and an
Hmm.
external environment.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
yeah.
And on top of it, our bodies, which you did mention first. I should
Mm-hmm.
step over that because
Mm-hmm.
perimenopause is everywhere on my news feed right now. Something. Oh, I'm like,
But
oh,
there's not a
that's a good
lot.
sign. Good sign of
There's
someone's
not a
age.
lot of information. As I said to you,
Hmm.
historically, you go through, menopause was the departure lounge.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
go through menopause and you just die. So,
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah,
that was pretty much it. But now women are living sometimes 50 years
yeah. After
after
menopause.
they've gone through menopause. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and clearly, it no longer makes sense to judge a woman by her reproductive potential because it's
Hmm.
no
Hmm.
longer, you know, 40 or, 40 of your 50 years
Yeah,
type of a thing.
yeah.
It's now we have children later
If at all.
because we often are educating ourselves, yeah, in one way or another.
Hmm.
So reproduction,
Hmm.
childbearing years are a whole lot less. It's a much smaller percentage of our entire lifespan. And
Hmm.
sometimes there's a struggle after you've gone through menopause for some women to say, well, what do I do now?
Hmm.
I'm, yeah, and depending on how menopause treats you, and we're thankfully getting more information on how to manage some of the symptoms of menopause. And for some women, it really is now more of an awakening
Hmm.
than that kind of death knell type
Hmm.
of an
Hmm.
experience. But
Hmm.
yeah, women have so much more to contribute even after they are no longer able
So for your
to
children.
bear
Yeah,
children. Yeah, and
I
then
can see that.
other parts of the conversation, there are women who choose not to bear
Hmm.
children, and there's some who struggle and are unable to, and often a lot of judgment and pain around those
Yeah.
types of experiences and decisions, and unfortunately, some of that comes from women.
Yeah, I could. Yes, and I'm one of those people, right, who's been unable to have kids, and it's
Mhm,
the that journey. There's some folks who fight it and go through the
mhm,
fertility treatments and so on,
mhm,
which comes
mhm,
with its own major mental cost. But
mhm,
there is a I feel like there are certain mental challenges that women alone bear, and that is one of them. That fertility conversation. I believe men
mhm,
experience it differently, right?
mhm, mhm,
But there's a piece that I love that you've mentioned. But what happens after the departure lounge, the old departure lounge, is
mhm,
now actually an opportunity, and it's funny enough, it's still a departure lounge because it's actually taking you out into the world as a different person.
mhm,
It's almost like
mhm,
it's almost like you're coming into because I know it like in old European cultures they would call it like the maiden, the mother, and the crone, but now the crone
mhm.
years are actually half of your life.
Yes,
And so
yes.
what do you see to be the challenges? Because we have quite a few viewers in that age group who
Mhm,
are now retiring
yes.
and looking at what happens after retirement. My mom is one of those people who has been like,
Mhm,
what do I do now? What
mhm.
do you see as the challenges that they are facing?
Well, that's one of the things, how to fill your
Mhm.
time. I'm not a strong believer in retirement.
Mhm.
I always think it's something that in itself, that loss of role, that loss
Yes.
of, being able to contribute, even if your work is stressful,
Mhm.
having that purpose,
Mhm. Mhm.
when that's gone, I've seen that adversely impact people's mental health, both men and women, quite a
Mhm.
bit. And I always say to people, wherever possible, even if you're going to retire, um, a car, you don't go from fourth gear to park in
Yeah.
one fell swoop. You kind of try
Oh,
to gear down.
that is
So
well said.
try, yeah. So as opposed to just one day I was doing all this stuff, and then the next week I'm just kind of staring into space and I have no clue what to do. That is definitely something that you want to plan. That is something that you need to start looking for things to do. And
Mhm.
I think one of the main things that women miss, um, today, a client said to me, her mom has passed away, and she said that her mom was, the wise person in her life. That was the person who gave tremendous insight and advice, and she felt that she lost that.
Mm.
And I think we miss how much wisdom we as women have.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
don't share all of our experiences. Some of them are associated with tremendous shame. Some of them, we see them as failures. But I always say to people, if you go down the street and you fall into a hole, and I will often say that to my patients, because sometimes I will share with them, not in a burdensome way, but I'll say to them, I've been through X or Y, and I'm still here, and that
Mm-hmm.
is how I know that a person can go through X or Y and make it out because I've done it, and I'm not superior to you in any way. I'm just another
Mm-hmm.
human being. You need
Mm-hmm.
the support. Let's try and fight through
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And I will say to them, there's nothing to be gained. If I go down the road and I fall in a hole and I break almost everything, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
able to kind of claw my way out alive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not saying to you, listen, there is a hole down there. Listen to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just just don't even
Yeah, yeah.
bother.
Don't
And
even
if you
go
have
there.
to go look out for it, take all
Yeah.
kind of light and walk on the right side because it is
Yeah.
on the left. And listen to me, it did me dirty. And
Yeah.
I think sharing our experiences as women, um and you don't have to have your own children. You can mentor, you
Mm-hmm.
can share that wisdom and pass it on, because the experiences of women, say in the workplace, the experiences of women in the home, the
Mm-hmm.
experiences of women in so many different contexts, that's not something that can be shared, not in the same way, by a
Mm-hmm.
man. So that
Mm-hmm.
when we go through menopause, when we no longer have to fight um, certain biological changes, and we don't,
Mm-hmm.
we've raised our children if we had them, or contributed to the lives of our nieces and nephews, or whoever we may have in our lives, and we have more time and more space, whether it's writing books, whether it's giving talks, whether it's taking a young lady who is entering your chosen field
Mm-hmm.
under your wing and saying, listen, I have some pointers for you.
Mm-hmm.
But that type of sharing
Mm-hmm.
requires that we work on things like pride and internalized misogyny.
Vulnerability. And ah.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
that's come up a few times since you and I've actually started to talk internalized
Hmm.
misogyny. And it's so funny
Hmm.
because it's not funny. It's actually quite stark right now in
Hmm.
my mind, given some of the accusations in our own local context of 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 human trafficking.
Yes.
That the majority of the perpetrators that are being identified are women,
Hmm.
trafficking
Hmm.
women, and
Hmm.
it is a an interesting phenomenon, right? Because it's more. I feel like it's more, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this because this is just my experience of it, of watching it. It's
Hmm.
more than just like Stockholm syndrome.
Hmm.
It's not Stockholm syndrome, right? It's not feeling empathy and sympathy and then coming to the side of your captor. But what is it? How does internalized misogyny show up? What does that look like?
Well, it's one of the saddest things that I see. I've witnessed it. I have been on the receiving end of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically adopting sexist attitudes that hold women to a lower social status. And I think some of it comes about from insecurity and jealousy, where some women project their own fear and envy and their own low self esteem onto other
Mm-hmm.
women. Some of it has to do with the environment, that competitive environment where I guess when you go all the way back, if another woman's if, basically another woman's success
Mhm.
was seen as as somebody else's failure.
Mhm. Mhm.
You're competing for scarce resources, and back in the day, the resource would have been male attention or
And
male
male
ownership.
protection. Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
and
Yes. Yes.
resources.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
So it was kind of a competitive environment. So there really wasn't enough maybe to go around.
Mhm.
And even if you were in a situation where there was one male who had multiple partners,
Mhm.
then there was always the opportunity maybe for preferential treatment or being
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
most important of the many type of a
Yes.
thing. So
Yep.
that type of competitive environment that we would have come along in some years, some women are sometimes socialized to compete
Mhm. Mhm.
rather than to collaborate.
And
And
that's at all levels of society, isn't it? Because you look at
yes,
Bridgerton. I'm watching Bridgerton sometimes, and I'm thinking, oh my
yes.
goodness, I would have died in that environment. I would never want a husband that bad.
Mhm, mhm,
No.
mhm, mhm. But
Yeah, but sorry,
that
not
was
to cut you.
survival.
It
That
was
was
survival
survival, you know,
at
and
every level.
that's a period piece set ages ago. But I think as recently as maybe the 1950s,
Hmm.
60s, in some
Hmm.
places,
Hmm.
the woman couldn't open a bank account
Yeah.
or enter into a contractual agreement without the permission of her husband. And this is not this is in the Western world, where we
Or
are
have her
so
tubes tied,
yeah,
or
yeah.
have, and that is actually something that I think OBGYNs practice here to this day. I've heard this recently, where an
So
OBGYN will
your
make a
own
decision to
body.
not tie your tubes at your request,
Mhm. Yeah.
or not tie your tubes until they'd spoken with your husband.
Hmm.
Terrifying. That terrifies me.
Yeah.
I'm like,
You just, yeah. So autonomy, ownership of your own body is
hmm,
still not yours in
hmm, hmm.
2026 kind of a thing.
It's
So
crazy, crazy to think of.
it's
But I hear you.
unethical is what
The
it is.
tying, true, and the tying into the internalized misogyny. I'm hearing from what you're saying is that it was actually, it was created by the scarcity of resources
Hmm.
and power really
Hmm.
being the resource, and the power being
Yes.
tied
Hmm.
to male relationships.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Hmm.
So it's something that we have to, as women, really take a long, hard look at
Mhm. Mhm.
and try and fight against it.
Yeah.
And it's not only in how we raise our girls and how we share wisdom with our girls, but how we as mothers raise our sons.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, because some of us raise our sons in such a way that they will be nightmares for somebody else's daughter. We
Mhm.
excuse all of their shortcomings. We
Mhm.
kind of continue this whole gender role situation where
Mhm.
they
Perpetuated.
don't need to know how to cook, they don't need to clean
Mhm.
up after themselves, because there is going to be somebody else to do it. And
Mhm.
when that somebody else is no longer you, it's somebody else's daughter. So that we
Yeah.
perpetuate that type of thing because life is now, you're going to create a situation where you may have a young woman who is now in that same type of situation, burning herself out
Yeah.
by being
Mhm.
always on, always
Mhm.
on in the workplace, and always on at home. So I think we need to start looking at raising our children, boys and girls, to focus on a division of labor because equality was very much in the workplace and voting rights and so on, but it's not in the home.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
not in the home. That has remained an area where there's certain chores, there's certain tasks, and we saw that in COVID quite a
Yes.
bit.
Yes.
Yes, when the
Yes.
lockdown happened and we were
Mhm.
all working from home, you realize that certain people were doing the laundry and certain people were doing the meals and certain people were doing certain things and some people were just working from home.
Mhm.
And that became quite a stressor because the default caregiver is a female. And when you have aging parents, the default caregiver for parents, because some women are almost sandwiched
Yep. Yep.
between parents who need care and
That's true.
children who need care, and the
It's
default
rare.
caregiver, yeah, the default caregiver is often a female
It's
caregiving
rare
role.
to see a man actually. I'm thinking about that. I mean, my partner is probably the only man in my generation that I'm aware of that is in the sandwich generation who is caring for his children. To be fair, he shares that right beautifully,
Mm-hmm.
but caring and also caring for his parent, and it is an
Mm-hmm.
exhausting thing to watch. It's
It is
fascinating,
very. Mm-hmm.
but and as a woman, the majority, I have a full expectation that I will have those responsibilities for my parents. It's strange. Like there's no like I don't even think about it. I have a
Mm-hmm.
brother who would
Mm-hmm.
not be unwilling. Don't get me wrong,
Wow.
but
Mm-hmm.
I have already
You
accepted in
set your
my mind
mind. That
that that's
is,
who
yeah.
I'm going to be for my parents. Like
Mm-hmm.
that, it's already there. That's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. The
Mm-hmm. Because
default, and I
that's
feel
the
like COVID.
default.
I think COVID also created another space too, where when the workplace was opening but schools had not, the men were the ones going back, but the women were then the ones that were losing their jobs. Right?
Well, equality at its
It does
finest.
not exist yet. It doesn't, and until it
Mm-hmm.
exists everywhere, it won't exist.
Yeah.
Is what I'm learning from your conversation, from what you're sharing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how can we support each other? I know I'm kind of running out of time, but I don't want to. I've begged for permission to go over a little bit,
Oh dear.
and
Yes.
no one's giving me any half.
They haven't
So I
cut your
think
mic
we
yet.
can take our time. We can take our time right about now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because there is a book that is coming to mind in the conversation that we're
Mm-hmm.
having that I would love to recommend to our viewers. It has come up before on our show. Um, but I wanted, before I get into that, I would really like to
Mm-hmm.
hear your thoughts on how we can support ourselves. Not the cliche, do some yoga, exercise, sleep, yada yada. Right? I'm
No.
not looking for that. I'm looking, how do we create the environment in which women are supported? That includes ourselves and our sisters
Mm-hmm.
around us.
I think it starts with the individual. I think a
Hmm.
lot of people have very low self-worth. And if you don't consider yourself to be worth it, everything just kind of goes from there. And having good self-worth, it's not a fixed trait, it's something that can be developed,
Yeah.
but it is something you have to be consistent, and you have to be intentional, and you have to make conscious choices every single day,
Hmm.
um, because it involves you have to cultivate a very strong, very deep internal belief that you have value.
Hmm.
And that for women takes a lot because of where we are coming from historically. And it
Hmm.
also means that you have got to move away from relying on external validation. And as we
Hmm.
were just saying, external validation was what determined our importance
Hmm.
historically. If
Hmm.
someone thought you were attractive and someone was willing to maybe pay a dowry or some other price to own you or to have you,
Hmm. Hmm.
then that's what determined your value. So it takes a lot of stripping away to start looking at yourself as inherently valuable.
Hmm.
Some of the things that we need to do definitely is to treat ourselves with some sort of kindness and compassion. Often I see women, especially all the time, maybe going through depression or anxiety, and the harsh words that they use about themselves, these are
Hmm.
the same people, and I often have to point out to them, if you had a friend who was facing this, you know, that's not how you would talk to them. That's not how you would talk about them. Why are you so lazy? And I don't understand. Like, you're not functioning and you're not doing anything. You're just lying there and like you're a
Hmm.
slug. And I'm
Hmm.
thinking, oh my God. Um, could you be nicer to my patient,
Mhm.
please?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
practicing some sort of self-compassion and
Yeah.
challenging negative self-talk. It is amazing how horrible the internal dialogue that some people have with themselves truly is. So it's
And
very
they believe it.
important.
You know, they
Yes,
believe that it's speaking the truth,
yes,
where and not
yes,
actually understanding the
yeah.
role of that voice is not to
And how
tell the
it
truth.
influence, yeah, yeah. You have to start seeing it that it's not necessarily truth. We
Mm-hmm.
have to be able to set healthy boundaries because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times saying no, a woman who says no is your no. The woman who says no, she has a problem. But
Yeah.
we do have to learn to say no to protect time, energy, and emotional well being. A lot of women go through life completely and malignantly overcommitted. And it is important to learn to set those boundaries and to
Mm-hmm.
say no, and not just boundaries in terms of limiting your load, but boundaries in terms of how you allow persons
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh, I think you froze. Or is it me
may
that's
not be
frozen?
willing to share,
Sorry.
so things of that.
So you kind of froze for a second there,
Oh, sorry.
but not
Are you
very
seeing
much.
me now?
I'm
Okay.
seeing you now, but you know, as you were speaking about saying no and setting boundaries, one of the things that came to my mind is that this is another place where we don't experience safety,
Mm-hmm.
right? That, you know, accepting help is a place where we don't feel safe. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and but also saying no, and saying no
Mm-hmm.
even to advances from strangers can feel
Mm-hmm.
very unsafe, and so we're very, very
Mm-hmm.
delicate in how we respond to those things,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
But even safety in terms of the
but it
amount
takes
of
courage.
information, yes,
Hmm.
it does, that you may want to share. And it may
Yeah,
even be in the home. It could be in
yeah,
a family gathering. Somebody
yeah.
stares you point blank at a wedding and says, "When are you going to get married? Why don't you have any children?"
Hmm. Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know,
I've
people
been
want to
there.
ask you
I've been
questions
there. Yeah,
that, and they expect answers that
yeah,
they don't have a right to.
yeah.
And so one of the things that we have to do, if this person was male, and that's something, again, when we talk about internalized misogyny, and sometimes, because
Hmm.
that is often something we see in workplaces.
Yes. Yep.
um, Women do also have to ask themselves those hard questions. If that was a male colleague, would I actually respond in that way? So we do
Yeah.
have to really be honest.
Hmm.
We have to make sure that the actions that we're taking are aligning with our values and with the goals that we have. But then you also have to know what your values are. So you have to identify your core values as a woman, what really matters to me, and make sure that your actions are consistent with that. Identify the things that you're good at, identify your strengths. And I've always found that cultivating gratitude, you said you
Hmm.
journal
Yes.
every
Oh,
day.
yes.
And sometimes, as simple as that, finding something that you can be thankful for can help to really shift a perspective away from criticism in general and self criticism.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I would say, limiting comparison. There is a saying that comparison is a thief
The
of
thief of
joy.
joy.
Yes. So, recognizing that external validation and comparing yourself to others, that doesn't define your worth. And unfortunately, we do have some persons among us who, as they say, they only seem to stand tall when somebody else is on their knees, and to realize
Mhm.
that there is space enough for other women.
Yeah.
Other women can do well, and it doesn't diminish how well you are doing. And seeking positive connections is another way that women can protect their mental health. Having people around you that are supportive, genuinely supportive, not, low key making fun of you or being critical of you. And in terms of fostering each other, I think opportunities wherever possible to encourage, mentor other women, collaborate with other women, that can
Mhm.
really start to tear apart the barriers that in that socialization and
Mm-hmm.
that misogynistic kind of tendencies that we see. But I think we also need to recognize that just as some women can be misogynistic,
Mm-hmm.
men can be feminists. And there
Yes.
are some
Yeah.
men among us who are willing to champion.
Lovely.
Yes,
Yes.
and it is to know who they are and
Mm-hmm.
to, welcome them into these spaces, because there are some men who are incredibly supportive. Not all men are terrible by any means, many are not. And
Mm-hmm.
there are those who don't have the insight.
Yeah.
Because of their own socialization. But if you share with them,
Their
they're
heart is
willing
in
to
the right
come.
place.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. They
I'm
don't
I'm
understand.
willing to accept imperfect allies.
Yes,
Yeah, imperfect.
yes.
But a lot of what you're describing, I feel comes from a place of courage and connection.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
even it's the courage to be seen, the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to connect, the
Mm-hmm.
courage to interrupt your own socialization, the courage to notice where you are being. A lot of these things are founded in courage.
Yes, and to look at your own biases,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
that takes courage. Because if
That
you,
takes a lot of
most
courage.
people, yes, most women, if you were to say to them, you're misogynist, of course not. Of
Mm-hmm.
course not. In the same way that most people, if you say to them that it's racist, they're
Uh-huh.
like, I'm not a racist. What do you
Yeah.
mean? Of course
Mm-hmm.
not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but because they don't realize it. And there
Yeah.
are some people, as I said, who, some people really are, and they're not really interested in change. But
Yeah.
there are some people who just don't realize. And if you make them aware, they're absolutely willing to come on board,
Mm-hmm.
and to make changes. But
Imperfect allies.
honest self reflection is really where things start. Self observation is key to making any positive change in your life. Because if you have no idea where you are, if you have
Mm-hmm.
no idea what the challenges are, what the problems are, you're not even going to start to try to fix them. So
Yeah.
you really do have to look at yourself, and often and honestly. It can be a bit
So
uncomfortable,
challenging. Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
growth.
There's so many places I would love to go with this conversation from here, but I know that we are at time. Um,
Yes.
and I would love to have you back on because I feel like there are a couple of open doors. And I just want to name them as I see them right now because one of
Mm-hmm.
them is that I would love to spend more time knowing how to work on your self-worth. Like how because you actually use the language around cultivating your self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to hear your thoughts around that at some point. But I would also love to see. I would love to create with our viewers, um, a pathway around how we create community, right, as women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I also have another piece that an open door that I have that I really probably need to take on for myself and actually do on a separate show at some point is there's spaces where we do not yet have the courage to engage with women and in conversations face to face, and that
Mm-hmm.
courage bar might feel very high, and this
Mm-hmm.
is where books come in so beautifully,
All
right?
right.
I have and I'm going to leave the audience with one recommendation, and I'm going to send it to you because I think it's
Please
one that it
do.
has really it has touched on so many of the themes that you and I have talked about today, and it is called Lessons in Chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Mm-hmm.
a woman by the name of Elizabeth Zott, who is a chemist in the 1950s, and she's a world class chemist. And
Mm-hmm.
there is a trigger warning at the beginning of the book. There is a sexual assault that takes place,
Mm-hmm.
and if you need a spoiler, she's fine and handles herself beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there is a powerful story of a woman
Mm-hmm.
before her time
Mm-hmm.
doing the things that you are describing
Mm-hmm.
and reaching out and seeking support, accepting help, noticing her negative self talk, holding on to her self worth in a world that is not allowing
At
for,
all, if she was in the 1950s and a scientist,
Mhm. And a
the
single mother,
fight,
and a single mother,
the
and
fight.
yeah, the true, like the true. We reading a book like this and seeing what a woman went through in the 1950s would have felt probably a year ago, maybe 3 years ago, would have felt
Mm-hmm.
less realistic to me because of
Mm-hmm.
the sheltering that I have experienced in my own life as a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as a um a very well cared for child of a complete home, wonderful
Mm-hmm.
dad, um,
Mm-hmm.
wonderful parents, but a daughter having a father around
Mm-hmm.
that unique kind of feeling, and then
Mm-hmm.
being educated. There's a lot of sheltering and privilege that I know that I experienced,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so reading this book and describing the 1950s and actually looking around and seeing that this is happening to people in my community, this stuff is
Mm-hmm.
happening even today, to young girls
Yeah.
in ICE prisons.
Mm-hmm.
This is the harm that women experience in the world is still there.
Mm-hmm.
That is it is a real comeuppance for us, I think,
Mm-hmm.
as women, and it may feel so unsafe, but that's where, in the absence of the courage that it takes to connect with human beings, pick up a book. Yeah,
Okay. Please share.
I will. I'm going to send it to you.
Yes.
But
Thank
we're going to
you.
say goodnight to our audience today. We are 10 minutes over
Yes.
time, and I am so grateful for you being here. You have been a
Thank
joy.
you so
I
much
never
for
I
having
don't know where
me.
the conversation was going to go. No idea where it's going to go. Like, you can have a loose plan, but there's, because we have so much to talk about whenever we speak, and I'm just so grateful that you could share that with
Thank you
the
so
rest of
much
my
for having me.
my
It was
tribe. Pleasure. Good
alrighty.
night,
Have a
all.
good night. Good night, everybody.